What is up, people of YouTube? I'm your host Vernon, and this is the Red River. Let's fish that. Alright, ladies and gents, when looking at today's fishing session, one might think, but Vernon, you're throwing out baits into the Red River, no different from any other video. And even though at the surface that is true, today's video is completely different. I'm going to be attempting to do something I've never done before and try and catch a specific fish, one that I've never caught before. Now, this mysterious fish, of course, is a lake sturgeon. Quite a confusing name, as they spend most of the time in rivers, but lake sturgeon are in these waters. Now, please know that from May to mid-June, there is a closed season where you're not allowed to target them. And most anglers actually believe you cannot specifically target sturgeon. It's the type of fish that shows up every once in a while. Now, I'll be honest, I don't think we are going to catch one out there today. But in this video, I want to show you my method of going through the different things and tasting to see what I can get out there on different baits. And that's what the focus of this video is going to be. So let's get to the fishing. Alright, so here's a look at the gear that I'm going to be using out there today. This rod I have here with me is a Okuma 12-foot fin chaser and the reel that came with. Now, the idea with the fin chaser series, that is supposed to be a carp rod, but because I do have dedicated carp setup, I never actually use this rod and reel for carp fishing. But this is a rod that can handle big fish, quite sturdy built, so you can cast out heavy weights as well as fight big fish. That is why I'm going to be using this rod out there today. And on the setup, I have a big 4-ounce lead egg weight and a little bead to protect my knot from this heavy weight, down to a little barrel swivel, and very importantly, a very short leader to a circle hook. Now, why is the short leader important? Well, we're targeting sturgeon. They are fish that feed on the bottom, their mouths point downwards, so this needs to be on the bottom. If you have a longer leader, your baits are going to be moving a lot through the water. We don't want that. We want a short leader down on the bottom, trying to keep our baits down there. Now, when it comes to what types of baits we need to be using to find these fish, I went on to YouTube and I watched a couple of videos trying to figure out what these fish eat. And of course, it can be very confusing. Different things seem to work in different locations. And for that reason, I have a couple of baits out there and I want to use different baits, throw them out, give them a couple of hours each, see if we get any fish. So I'm going to talk about each of the baits as we get them out there, give it a couple of hours, see whether we get any fish on them, bring them in, rebait to a different one. So let's get our setup baited. So the first bait, and the one people seem to catch the most sturgeon on, is just night crawlers, but using a few of them to make a big ball of night crawlers. We don't want the small channel catfish to get them, but I think night crawlers, we know everything will eat night crawlers, so I think we're still going to have some problems with catfish. That's why I want to start with this one, get it out of the way. Right, so we got some night crawlers baited. I'm hoping that this 4-ounce weight will be enough for the current we have out there. I'm going to get it out there and we wait, see if something is willing to go for the night crawlers. Alright, so even though this is the bait that catches the most sturgeon, I think this is also the bait that you have the least chance of catching them on because of all the other fish that also eat night crawlers. But we'll throw it out there, see what we get, and then swap out to the different baits. Alright, as one would expect, when using night crawlers, we get tiny little channel catfish. That is the problem when using night crawlers, but our first little fish landed. Let's get him back to the water. Not our targeted species, but at least we won't get skunked. And off he goes. Alright, so that's what we're expecting from this bait. So let's swap out to a different bait. Alright, so our second little bait, it's not something new. We're going to be using some bait fish. Now, most people tend to use big chunks of bait fish, but I've seen that lots of people say that these fish like to eat smaller things. So I'm rather going to use some smaller whole fish. And normally these fish, I would use a little octopus hook, just hook it through the jaw. But this time around, I've seen something done a little differently, and I'm going to be doing that. So rather than going through the nose, I'm going to go through the back of the fish. And we go through the entire little fish like that. And to try and ensure our little bait stays on the hook, I'm going to use some elastic string. Now this is something I've used a lot in South Africa when going coastal fishing, where you bind your baits to your hooks. It's not something that you get a lot of in the shops around here, but this one I got from Amazon, just some elastic string. And the general idea is we're going to tie our little bait fish to the hook using this elastic string. Now hopefully that stays on the hook a lot better, and if a fish grabs it, we have our little circle hook. So let's get that out into the water. Right, so far we had 2 catfish, one going for the little night crawlers, one going for a little bait fish. As expected, these are baits used in these waters quite a lot, and often people tend to catch fish on them. So for that reason, I'm going to move over to some different baits, something when searching on the internet for sturgeon, something that they would rather prefer than the usual baits, to see if we can target them specifically. Now, first I'm just going to use some shrimp or some prawn. Now, this is uncooked shrimp. The idea being that sturgeon actually do eat all sorts of little crayfish and crabs and stuff in the water, all sorts of small crustaceans. So I'm going to put that on. This is something that's used rather regularly to catch catfish, so I'm a bit skeptical about this one. But like I said, there is a logical reason behind people saying this works for sturgeon. So I'm just going to thread that on our little hook. Once again, going to get it out there, give it an hour or so, see if we get anything, swap out to a different bait. Alright guys, so when it comes to the shrimp, I constantly needed to rebait. Quite a lot of small fish stealing the little shrimp, biting that off. But it has now been an hour, and I'm going to change over, put on some different baits. Now the next bait is a bit of a stretch. Alright, so after watching some videos on YouTube, I saw that some people are using clams. And whenever walking along the river, you'll sometimes see some broken shells and clams. I'm thinking clams may be actually something that these fish like to eat. But unfortunately, I couldn't get any clams, so I have some scallops as the closest thing to a clam, a fresh clam that I could get. So I'm going to put on some scallops, see if maybe that's something these fish will be willing to go for. Now once again, we're going to get the baits out there, have them soaking for an hour, see if we get any fish. Now with these, I'm not making a massive cast because I want to try and keep the clams on the little hook there. I'm not tying them to the hook. If I see they're falling off too easily, we have to maybe tie them to the hook.
1 hour later.
Alright guys, so the last bait I want to try out there is going to be some squid. Now this is actually something that I don't think would work in a freshwater river. However, watching some videos Seeing people from Edmonton catching them using squid. We're going to take a piece of squid, put that on the hook, get it out there, see if we get anything from that.
I was reading on the news like that.
Alright, ladies and gents, it's now been a couple of hours of soaking some different baits out there and not really getting any hits. Now, when it comes to this type of fishing, people sometimes say that it takes long hours of soaking the baits before the fish find your baits, and you need to look for the deep holes. And of course, I don't know where the deep holes are in this river, but I do know that people have caught some sturgeon in this particular spot before. That's why I thought I want to give it a whirl out there. Now, of course, this proves nothing about which baits work and don't work, but it was a fun little experiment for me to see how different fish react to the baits as well. Now, of course, it's going to take quite a few different spot hopping and trying to use the baits out there and see where I can get fish. But for the time being, I think I'm going to put on a little different rig, throw out some baits, and see if I can get some more fish. So no longer targeting specifically sturgeon. I'm going to move over and try and see what I can catch out there for a couple of hours more. Alright, ladies and gents, it's been a couple of hours of getting some channel catfish and some stone cats. No sturgeon out there today, and I think quite a lot of people would actually have been angry if the first time I go and target sturgeon I actually caught some sturgeon. You need to be very lucky to do that. It takes some time and some experimenting, finding the right places to try and find some sturgeon. But with all of that said, this video wasn't really about catching sturgeon. It was more to show that there are a lot of things I don't always put in the videos. It's not always just going out and catching fish. Sometimes I do have to do some research and spend some time testing baits, testing lures, testing to find out what works. And it is important to keep that in mind, especially on YouTube when seeing people catch fish. It's not as simple as just go out there and catch. Sometimes you need to test a few things. And I wanted to show it's okay to sometimes do something a bit strange. I mean, throwing out some squid into the Red River, that's not normal. But it is fun to do some different things and see if something works. You might just discover that new bait that works great. Otherwise, it's just a little learning experience. Alright, but wind is picking up. So I want to thank you guys for following along. Please give me a little thumbs up if you enjoyed the video. Feel free to ask any questions down below in the comments. If you're new to the channel, consider hitting subscribe, joining my community. And of course, if you have any hints or tips on where to find sturgeon, please go down in the comments and tell us. Alright guys, but thanks for following along. Like always, see you next time.